All right, so we're started recording. Welcome everyone to the 13th edition of Let's Talk, lucky number 13 here in the month of October. Today we're going to be talking about motivating yourself for life changes. This is a talk I've given several times over the past few years, and it's really one of those good ones because we don't spend a lot of time talking about motivation. We spend a lot of time talking about the things we'd like to accomplish. So it's nice to have a talk that focuses on how do we get ourselves to get there. I've made some changes to it this year based on some stuff I've learned in the last year to sort of make it even more practical for how we implement this information in our lives. So I am Dr. Joshua Eyer. I'm an assistant professor in the Capstone College of Nursing. I'm the host of this series and a researcher and teacher. In the Capstone College of Nursing, I teach quantitative methodologies and biostatistics mostly. And I also do research in integrated behavioral health and opioid treatment and LGBTQA health. I got my PhD at the University of North Carolina at Charlotte in clinical health psychology in 2012. So, oh, that's the wrong date. You'll see why in just a second. Motivation to change health behaviors. My get up and go must have got up and went. When I have the slides up, this is the only image I see, so I forget to change that date. But we most of us have that experience, probably all of us have that experience of wanting to make a change, wanting to do something that we know is going to be good for us, but we just feel like this dog here just laid out on the ground and having no desire to get up and do anything. So we're going to talk a little bit about how we can influence that feeling so that we can accomplish more of the things we want to accomplish. And I don't spend a lot of time in this during the talk, but I'll start out by saying it's okay to be tired. It's okay to be stressed. It's okay to be worn down. It's okay to not really have a lot of energy with all of the stress and things that we're dealing with in our lives right now and just in general. And this talk is not meant to invalidate you about those things. The reality is that life can be really challenging, and our lives right now are really challenging. So one of the big messages is to love yourself through whatever processes we're going through and respect the process you have about how you approach life. And we'll come back to that a little bit at the end too. But I really want to start out with that. Like, this is a mechanism for us to show ourselves more compassion while we show ourselves more caring. And we shouldn't lose sight of that in the process. Okay, somebody raised their hand just a second ago. Is there a question to get started? That happens by accident sometimes. So unless I see something in the chat, I'll move on. Okay, so of course, motivation is not permanent, but then neither is bathing. It's something you should do on a regular basis. Yes, we'll be talking about that throughout the talk. So the outline today, we're going to talk a little bit about behavior, a little bit about motivation, a little bit about theory of change, and then we're going to bring it all together. So here's some questions to get started. I want you to think about what problems you have with motivation. Just take a second to think about it. When you're thinking about finding motivation to do something and you struggle with it, what would you say those problems are? Just jot them down for yourself on a piece of paper or on notes in your phone or something. Okay, and then the next question is, what do you do to help with those things? Take a second to think about what you do to get around those obstacles. Okay, now think about how those work for you. Do they work the same? Do they work some days and not others? Do they not really work well at all? All right. So health behaviors is the main focus of what I'm talking about, but we can use today's exercises in all sorts of ways. Health behaviors tends to be one of the areas we have the most frustration. So health behaviors include things like exercise and diet and medication adherence, sleep, smoking, alcohol use. And so we're going to start out talking about behavior. What causes a behavior to occur or not? This will not be new to y'all, but it's a nice refresher to have. So reinforcement or punishment. You see here the carrot is calling the stick a psycho and the stick is calling the carrot a wimp. Like these are the two ways we can motivate ourselves, reinforcement or punishment. And some people have a preference for one of these over the other, and these can be good for you in different ways. I tend to be a carrot person, and to try to implement carrots. We can use sticks to motivate ourselves, but they can also cause us to lose energy and to feel less motivated to show compassion to ourselves. But there is a time and a place and a role for both of these. So we're going to talk more about them. One of the core concepts related to behavior is this idea of contingencies. And you'll see here the ABC model. And that's the idea that there are antecedents, things that come before a behavior. Triggers is one of the terms that we'll often use to describe that. And those lead into the behavior. And then afterwards, you have the C, which is consequences, and that is feedback. So there are things before a behavior that can elicit it or limit it. And then there are things after a behavior that can increase its rate or decrease it. So triggers and feedback, antecedents or consequences. So for antecedents, you can ask yourself questions that'll really help you to understand the kinds of things that led up to you making a choice about your behavior. So the question of who, this is an example of if I wanted to go to the gym, right? So who? Other people there working out. What? Roving eyes that could have an impact on whether or not I go. When? It's when I exercise. Where? At the gym. Why? Because I'm out of shape. How often? Every time, right? So like we can really be thinking about the thoughts that we have before a behavior that can influence it. And using these questions can help us to probe what those thoughts might be. And then we have punishment. So punishment is something that it's the stick, right? It's the thing that's going to decrease a behavior. So positive punishment is when you add something unpleasant. And this is like most of the punishments we think about related to children. So timeouts, sitting in the corner, those are where you're like telling them that they have to do something that's a punishment. There are lots of things like that that we do. Corporal punishment is a classic example of spanking. Negative punishment, though, is where you take something away. This is more like what grounding is, or when a kid loses a privilege. And both of these things will function to decrease the behavior that's being punished, although there can be really negative side effects of the types of choices you make related to punishment. And there's some big ones around spanking and things. So reinforcement are things that are going to increase the behavior. So negative reinforcement is when you take something away that has a net positive that leads to that behavior increasing. So in this case, noxious odors are happening in the Simpsons house, and they get Homer to take away the dirty clothes. So the smell then leaves, and then everybody's happier, right? And so they'll gather in the living room or something when they wouldn't have before. You've increased the happiness and their presence in the living room. So for here, positive reinforcement is when you get something rewarding that also increases the behavior. So it shows Bart studying, and then he gets a good grade on his test, and then he's happy and he's telling Marge about it, and hopefully he would study more. So it's really important to recognize that there's punishment and reinforcement, and that those can happen by adding something in or by taking something away. Because it gives us that whole menu, like knowing those gives us a bigger menu of things that we can use with ourselves. So I love this cartoon. It's a special hearing aid. It filters out criticism and amplifies compliments. And if any of you know a crotchety person with a hearing aid, you'll know that it's a strategy to turn the hearing aid down when they're in an environment where they don't want to interact much or stuff. And I think this cartoon has a neat way of walking that into our day-to-day lives. It would be great if we could filter out criticism and only amplify compliments in our life. So let's talk about motivation. I should say that if you have questions about what I'm talking about, go ahead and ask those as well. If I see them in time, I will try to respond to them while I'm talking. Okay, motivation. What motivates you? We talked about this a little bit, but I want you to think about more generally, what are your biggest motivations in life? Is it your kids? Is it work success? Is it good grades? Is it a promotion, better pay? What are the things that when you think about in your life having the greatest ability to motivate you? What are they? Okay, when you think about the quantity of motivation that you need to do something that you want to do, how much does it take? Okay, so I'll just move forward. So this is the answer, right? The motivation it takes is the motivation needed to perform a habit. And this is a really valuable little graph here. When you're starting out a new habit or a new behavior, it takes a lot of motivation because you haven't done it before. There's so many things that are new about it. There's so many barriers you have to get over just to get started. But once you got that habit, you'll see that the motivation you need to engage in it decreases and decreases and decreases until making coffee in the morning, you don't need any motivation. You can get out of bed and you can be completely catatonic. And okay, I got a message. Seems like we're all still here. Okay, it said I'd been signed out, but it looks like I haven't been. Great. So when you get to this point, then it becomes automatic, like making coffee in the morning where you don't even need your brain on yet, and somehow you can make a pot of coffee. That's the ideal with health behaviors, is to get to where they become that automatic. So the reason I talk to y'all about what your motivations are is related to our hierarchy of needs. We are all having this pyramid of needs represented in our lives in different ways. And yes, Amy, coffee is very motivating. I've cut myself back to 1 cup in the morning, and it's still super motivating just to get that 1 cup. So the motivations that we have here, like these needs, are motivating. If we are not breathing, we are highly motivated to figure out how to get air into us. If we're not eating, or if we're thirsty, or we need sleep, or haven't had sex in a while, although that varies more for people than the others, like those have to be met. And if not, they become the only important thing in our lives until we meet those. Once we've gotten those needs met, we also have needs related to safety. And this is sort of like having a good job, feeling like we're moral people, being connected to family, having our health feel all right, having our housing okay. And then above that, we have love and belonging, and that's friendship and family and sexual intimacy. And as you move up these lists, you'll see that more and more these are things that some people don't have and they manage to live. As you get up the list, these drives are less powerful, but they can still be really important. And if you're not getting these, then you're probably aware of that, and they're probably on your list of things you would like. Once you have the love and belonging needs, you move up to esteem, which is like accomplishment and mastery. And then finally, with self-actualization, you're achieving these things that feel like you're transcending just the life you live to these greater purposes. If we're not getting our love, belonging, safety, esteem needs met, it's very hard to achieve self-actualization. Not impossible. This is not a linear approach. Like, all of these things exist at the same time. But the reason I wanted you to talk about what motivates you, and the reason I spent a little time with Maslow's hierarchy of needs today, is because this is also a menu. We can use these needs by really connecting with them to motivate us to do something important. So when people are quitting smoking, they will talk about all of these things. They will talk about how smoking leaves them dehydrated and makes them feel bad, and it takes away their financial wellness, and it can disrupt their home life, because if they smoke inside, their house gets dirty, their car is dirty and smelly inside, or they have to go outside all the time into the elements and it's not comfortable. It can interrupt their friendships and their relationships if they have a partner who doesn't like them smoking, or if they can't hang out with some friends because they smoke. And obviously it can affect, all of these things. So connecting with these drives can help somebody to quit smoking. And one I hear all the time about quitting is, I want to be around for my grandkids. I want to be there for my kids. So this love, belonging can be so powerful. So that leads us to this discussion of what kinds of motivations are most powerful. And there's a huge range. Intrinsic motivations tend to be the most powerful because we connect with them, we carry them with us, and they're connected to the things that matter most about us. So these include things like the feeling of belonging, a feeling of mastery, finding meaning in life, fun, sex, love, self-knowledge. Like, connecting with those values can be incredibly important for motivating us to achieve some behavior. So we've gone from thinking about what are these drives in life that matter, and then, if you're having trouble connecting to a basic safety value and you're getting up that list to esteem values, then intrinsic value becomes really important. And the deeper and more meaningful the value is that you hold, for example, if learning is incredibly important to you, then connecting with that learning value will be really powerful for helping you figure out how to motivate yourself towards something. So people who just for fun are taking these online courses, like the happiness course that Laurie Santos does, that's a learning and also sort of building positivity into your life, right? That's connecting with those values in a way that can motivate them to work their way through the course at their own speed. The other type of rewards are extrinsic rewards. And these are things like gold stars, or points or levels or badges or prizes or money. And they can be useful, they can be valuable, but they're less valuable than the intrinsic rewards. Getting an extrinsic reward works for you less well than if you can really connect with the value. So here are the four main categories of intrinsic reward. And I've got a little questionnaire that I've developed about this that I'll send you if you email me, so that you can find out for yourself which of these that you appreciate most. but most of us can generally identify that. So the four ones are relatedness, which is that socialization, that interconnection with others. Autonomy, which is a free spirit, right? That's like creativity, choice, freedom, responsibility. It's that ability to live on your own and decide your own way. Then mastery is a really important one. And this is about learning, being the best, like being an achiever, accomplishing things that are important to you. And then the last one is purpose. And that's that what you're doing is feeding into something bigger and greater than yourself. So contributing to the greater good or connecting with the higher power. These four motivations, these four types of intrinsic motivation are held by all of us. And we use all of them in different contexts. But these tend to be something that we have a preference for. So the most powerful for some people is coming back to connecting with a higher power in the things they do in their lives. And for other people, it's the competitiveness of like being the best and like coming out on top. So thinking about these and thinking about your pattern here will help you to make sure that when you're setting goals for yourself and choosing rewards, that you're doing, choosing goals and pathways that allow you to connect with the way you like to do things best. So Amy mentioned that being social and learning is big for her. So relatedness and mastery goals would probably be important. So for people like that, like working in a group, like being part of, like if it's an exercise goal, being part of an exercise group where everybody is contributing to the group's success and competitiveness with other groups might be a really good way for you to connect with motivating yourself. But there's a big, big problem, and that is that extrinsic motivators can really, really undermine intrinsic motivators. And the classic example of this is piano lessons. So a lot of kids, when they're really young, think piano is very cool, and they go up and they plink, plink on it. And then their parents say, oh, you seem to like piano so much, I'll get you piano lessons. And so the kid goes to piano lessons and comes back and complains about all the practicing. And the parents are like, well, if you practice, every day this week, I'll give you $10 at the end of the week. And that works for a few weeks because the kid is like, this is an easy $10. But after a little bit of time, they ask themselves, gosh, is the $10 really worth this? I really don't like playing piano. And they've completely lost any internal motivation to play piano because the money, the extrinsic motivator, actually confused them about why they were interested in piano in the first place and caused them to disconnect with that intrinsic motivator. And man, we see this all the time in our lives once we start looking for it. So one thing is, like, some people like to go running, and if they try to go back to running because they want to lose 5 pounds and they've been running for a week and they haven't lost any weight, then they might stop running because they've lost the fact that running was something they did just because they enjoyed it, because they were looking for that motivator of losing a few pounds. Erin says that autonomy is their motivation as well. Okay, so moving then from motivation, we're going to talk just a little bit about theory, and then we're going to bring all of this together and start talking about our own stuff. So some of you are probably familiar with the health belief model, and the reason I bring this up, because it looks like a technical model, look at all those boxes. The reason I bring this up is because it's a really useful way to think about the process of engaging in a health promoting behavior. So the likelihood that we'll do it is influenced by a number of different types of variables. These include the perceived benefits versus the barriers. What am I going to get out of this behavior, of doing this behavior, versus how hard is it to do it? Another one is the perceived threat of not doing the behavior. And this is related to the perceived seriousness of what could happen and our perceived susceptibility to it. And man, we're talking about this stuff a lot with COVID. So when people talk about the perceived threat of COVID, you'll hear people saying like, well, a lot of people are really susceptible, so we should all be careful. And then other people are saying, well, it's not really that serious to most people. And so the perceived threat is all over the map for us. And trying to figure out what we should be doing in response to COVID is very difficult because we're getting so many mixed messages about the threat. Another variable is self-efficacy. So how much do I feel like I can engage in this behavior? And then finally, cues to action. So what sorts of things are going on in our lives around us that cue us to our need to engage in a health promoting behavior. So being aware of these four elements, I think, is really useful. And that's why I bring up the health belief model. So let's talk a little bit about how it actually works to motivate ourselves. This is physics. I'm not going to go into detail about it. This is a free body diagram. You don't need to know this. There won't be a quiz. But this is sort of a physical representation of the kinds of things that are going on for us when we go to develop a behavior. We tend to have this feeling of like, I'll do it if I want to do it. And that's true. But the things that shape whether or not we do it are actually all of the variables around us. And so here with this skier, the skier is only going to go downhill if the power of gravity, the force of gravity, is greater, pulling this weight down along this grade than the force of friction. And that's why skiers have to wax the bottom of their skis, because it decreases that friction force and increases the chance that gravity will pull them down the hill. So when we think about exercise, how much are the things motivating us to engage in exercise able to overwhelm the friction that would keep the status quo, that would keep us static and keep us from engaging in that behavior? And what sorts of things could we do to modify the friction in our life that would keep us from moving forward? I like this because it pulls pulls us out of the blame game. It pulls us out of this idea that there's something flawed about us and that's why we're not engaging. Like the large majority of the time, the reason we're not engaging in a health behavior is because we haven't orchestrated things in our environment to make it easier for us to do the behavior. I took that physics, so maybe this works for me and doesn't work for all of y'all. If this worked for any of y'all, please let me know, because I can get rid of it, but I thought it would be useful. So that leads us to the trans-theoretical model of change. And I think this is also useful. People use this mostly for substance use, but it applies to any health behavior. And the idea is that we start out here in pre-contemplation where there's no intention of changing our behavior. We are moving forward in our lives, keeping things the way they are, and we're not even thinking about change. Then something triggers us to start thinking about change related to some problem that we notice exists, but we haven't committed to actually doing anything about it. We're just sort of aware that it's a problem. The next step is preparation, and that's when we decide, okay, it's a problem and I should do something about it. What should I do? And preparation is when you're starting to figure out what you should do, to choose a course of action, which is the next step. And then once you've acted, the stage after that is maintenance, where you're putting effort into continuing that action. And then, as all of us have experienced, we fail to continue that action and we relapse. And like just exercise alone is such a good example of that, because every single day you have to decide to exercise. And any day you skip doing a physical activity, you've skipped out of maintenance into relapse. And so the next day you have to jump right back into action. And the longer you go without exercising again, the more effort you have to put into working back around this curve to action again. So I think this is useful to help us recognize that relapse is part of the main maintenance of any health behavior, but it's also important to get back on the wagon again and on what you're doing. And Carolyn made a post about the Sleep More, Stress Less program, which is coming up, and y'all can ask us questions about that when we get to the end of the talk. So here's where we bring it all together, and I'm making good enough time. We're going to be able to have some good question and answer afterwards. So bringing it all together, the big fallacy about health behavior, like one of the really, really important myths to think about, is willpower. And most of us have seen these studies about the kids and how long can they resist eating the marshmallow, and what does that mean about our ability to put off pleasurable things later in life so that we can, achieve our goals. This is research. It's decent research. It's not exactly as compelling as it's usually presented. There are some consistencies, but willpower is not the cause. Willpower is not the secret to engaging in health behavior change. It is not about willpower. So if it's not about willpower, what is it about? So willpower is something that we have different levels of. Some of us, we can sort of increase our ability to have willpower if we invest in it, but that doesn't mean it's the deciding factor. We're going to talk about some things that are. The reality is that motivation is what gets you started, but habit is what keeps you going. So we're going to talk about habits. Some of you might have heard about Atomic Habits. It's a book by James Clear. This is a really good synthesis of the research about how to create behavior change in yourself. So this basic graph here suggests that if you will just do 1% improvement every day for 1 year, you can have amazing outcomes. So you'll actually be 38% better if you just do 1% every day, versus if you do just a little bit less, not much will change. You'll still be really low. So this is to motivate the thinking about a little bit of behavior change every single day as a habit can actually produce really huge results over time, whereas not doing it there's not a whole lot of loss to it. So that means that the goal is actually the process. The way to achieve a long-term goal is to focus on making the goal a tiny step every day, and just every single day achieve that goal. And you don't have to keep this one in mind. You don't have to keep your long-term big goal in mind. You don't have to think about that all the time. You can really build in rewards for yourself related to the small goals that you're doing every single day. And yet that'll maintain that behavior to the point where you are achieving that big goal down the road. And this, I cannot emphasize enough how important this is to understanding how to achieve health behavior change. So the book presents these this habit loop for forming habits, and I think it's really, really useful. So the idea is you're building 4 things into your day every single day to promote a habit. And once you have the habit in place, the habit becomes automatic and it's easy to maintain. And these are 4 elements you can get in your life that make the habit easy to maintain. And then the opposite of them makes it hard to maintain the habit and easier to break the habit. And the first of these is cues. So you want to have things in your environment that remind you every day to do the habit that you're building. So these can be things like a Post-it note placed in the right place so that you see it every single morning, an alert that pops up on your phone. I used to put a Post-it note on the dashboard of my car to remind me to think about something. My Fitbit will notify me 10 minutes before the end of every hour to remind me to get 250 steps in that hour. It'll remind me if I want it to do mindfulness every single day. So building cues into your environment make it easier or make it harder for you to go through your day without forgetting to do the behavior. And the opposite for breaking a habit is to make it invisible, to get rid of anything that would cue you to it. So the second one is craving, and what they say here is make it attractive. And the idea is connect doing the habit with all of those motivators we were talking about before. You want to build in reinforcement, whether that's adding something or taking it away. You want to connect it to your intrinsic values, to the deep-seated things that are really awesome for you. And sometimes you also want to give yourself an extrinsic reward. You want to figure out something that's going to make you feel happy, or make you feel good about having done it. Those two things work. What I say is do intrinsic until you feel the intrinsic fading, and then find an extrinsic, and then go back to intrinsic. So when I run every day, I don't need a lot of motivators, because it feels good. I like how it feels. I like the positive, like, internal things that happen. But some days it's really hard, and I like to take a minute when I've had a hard day where I was tired and it was a slow run or something, and just like congratulate myself for it, and take a moment to be really aware, and to really, make it clear to myself how much I appreciate that I did that, even though it was hard today, even though it wasn't easy, and to remind myself how good it feels on the other days, and how, like, doing some activity on hard days, even in a compassionate way, helps me to have those better days when it feels really good. The third of these is, of course, the opposite for breaking a bad habit, or if you're going to lose a habit, is to make it unattractive. So if you focus on the negatives, you're actually making it less likely you'll do that behavior. The third one is to make it easy. Decrease as many barriers as you can. Think about the obstacles. Come up with plans to get around the obstacles. One of the things for exercise is to try to do it at the same time every day. But one of the things that all of us know about our lives is our lives are hectic, and that things come up, and sometimes we can't exercise at that time. And so I always tell people to pick multiple times and get in the habit of doing it at that first time, or having a backup time. And that's also true of the type of exercise you're doing. So I mentioned running, but if I'm really tired, I do a walk instead. Because, like, I want to make it easy. I don't want to make it so hard on myself that then I don't let myself do it. So if I'm having a bad day, I start out running, it doesn't feel good, I just stop and walk. If I'm really tired and I find myself thinking about avoiding the run, I just tell myself I'm going to walk, and that I'll keep it nice and easy and just go out for 20 minutes or something. And that way, like, I'm keeping the habit of exercising every day, of, like, observing that time, but I'm also, like, making it easy enough on myself that I'll keep the habit. And then the opposite of that is make it hard. A good example of that is when people are trying to quit smoking, they'll hide their own cigarettes and stuff. And always, like, make it hard to find a lighter, so that just, like, delays starting the cigarette long enough that sometimes they don't have it. And then the fourth is the reward. So make it satisfying. Make sure that you're getting that feedback at the end of doing the habit that's going to make you more likely to do the habit again. Sometimes that's noticing how good you feel about connecting with something that's valuable or important to you. Sometimes it's about a creature comfort. Whatever it is, like, be mindful and intentional about loving yourself and congratulating yourself for doing something that is a goal that you're working on. So a daily activity, a goal, and when you accomplish it, reward yourself for accomplishing it. And then for breaking bad habits, it's the other, like, when you do it, focus on making yourself feel punished for having done it. Okay, so this is a great quote about atomic habits. Every action you take is a vote for the type of person you wish to become. No single instance will transform your beliefs, but as the votes build up, so does the evidence of your new identity. The reality that this quote points at is you don't change yourself in one day, but you can change yourself dramatically by doing something small every day that's working towards the person you want to be. Okay. Love these pictures. We can do it. We can exercise. We can get out there. If she can do plow position, then maybe one day I can do plow position, right? Like, it's really important to recognize that we are doing it every day. Every single day, we're doing things that are working towards our goals. So the consistency over time is how we actually achieve those goals. But it's not that we can't do it. We actually already do it every day. Okay, so let's talk about some of these things you guys put in the chat. And feel free to follow up with other comments. I can't expand this chat box, so I have to scroll a lot here. So let's see, the first one I have here is from Sharon Jones. I'm on a weight loss plan now and have been successful thus far. Congratulations, Sharon. Exercising more and just eating at home more. I'm planning to retire in 5 months, so I want to be fit and able to keep up with my 4-year-old granddaughter. So that's awesome, Sharon. Great job. What I hear there is that you are connecting this plan with something that's incredibly important with you, for you, to you, that you're going to retire soon, so you're going to have more time to yourself, and that you want to be fit so that you can keep up with your granddaughter. And that's exactly what I meant about when you connect with something that's really meaningful and important to you, it makes it easier to give yourself those little bits of energy. And I know that you can tell us all about how you're making decisions every single day about what you're eating and about what kind of exercise you're getting, because that's the only way to get to where you're actually accomplishing things. Okay, in the question and answer box, we've got a question about motivation to keep focused at work. Maureen, maybe in the chat you can tell us a little bit more about what you mean for that question. And Aaron asks, can you explain quests as extrinsic rewards? So Aaron, extrinsic rewards can be things that you find motivating that are external. So for some people, the idea of exploring can be really motivating. And so when you're exploring something, you discover something new. And the goal of being an explorer is internal. But then as you find new things, that's actually a concrete motivator to you to keep exploring. So new things give us a reward pop if we're kind of explorers. So quests in that way can be extrinsically motivating. So the next one from Jasmine, managing my time better to have better life balance. So Jasmine, this is a hard one because time management is an activity. It's a daily activity. And a lot of times we keep these sort of rough ideas of what we need to do, and we find ourselves engaging in them without planning for how to engage in them. So giving yourself, like, this is a really good approach to time management. For 5 or 10 minutes of every single day, cueing yourself to do it, you sit down and you make a list of all the things you have to do today. And you make a list of which are most important. And you figure out, before you get started on anything else, when you're going to do those things. So you anchor what you need to do most to specific times in the day. And if it's a long chunk of time, then within that specific time, you build in moments to stop and reflect about the progress you're making in that time period and whether you think you're going to be able to accomplish it. And if you're taking longer than you need to, what part can you sort of cut out to make sure that you can fit within that time frame? Now that is a skill that gets better with time. And it's something where you're investing in getting good at something that you don't start out good at. So give yourself a lot of love and compassion and time and space to get better at it as you do it. But that's a really important process for having better time management. You really have to be strategic and give yourself time to sit and think about it. Okay. So Aaron also mentioned my goal is to do a thorough inventory of the art I have created since 2008. That sounds like an amazingly fun activity. So for me in the life I live, that would be rewarding just on its own. So I don't really know what the barriers are to you because I don't know, what it's like inside you. But for building something like that, rather, that's a huge goal, a thorough inventory. That goal is built up huge and complex and hard. So what you want to do is you want to say, that is my stretch goal. That is my goal for where I want to be in a year. But where I want to be in a month is I want to have started doing that. I want to have my process in place. I want to have a good idea about how I'm going to go about it. And then every day I'm going to inventory 5 things. And create yourself a little checklist for each day that you check off, showing that you did 5 things that day. And that's what I mean about pulling away from the big goal and focusing on the process goal. And you can get to where every day you're checking off those 5 things, and you turn around in 2.5, 3 months and you realize that you've now inventoried, doing math, 400 pieces of art or something like that. Gets you really, really far down that road. 150, I don't know. I didn't do math well on the spot. One of y'all can correct me. But that's the basic approach, Aaron, to how you would go about achieving a big goal like that. So Lashandra said ways to stay consistent with diet and exercise. We've talked about that. There are 2 really, really, really key things about it. One is to create a daily habit for diet and exercise, where every single day you're checking in with yourself about accomplishing that little goal for that day. So it can be, to have one meal that's all vegetables or something like that. And that can be your process goal to get you to have a better diet. Or with exercise, it's that every single day for 30 minutes, I'm going to do some kind of activity that gets me out of a chair and gets me active. And then rather than focusing on the long-term goals, you're focusing on every single day trying to achieve that goal. And almost as important as having those daily goals is recognizing that you never want to go for a streak of more than one day not accomplishing the goal. So recognizing that life is hard and you can have a day where you miss, but if that happens, the next day, you are 100% going to accomplish that goal. You're going to relapse sometimes, but you're going to get right back on the wagon as quickly as possible, because that is the way to make small breaks from our goals not lead to big problems in achieving our long-term goals. Sherry said, I'd like to lose weight and start exercising. I plan to stop eating out so much and cook more at home. Also plan to start walking 2 to 3 times per week. That's great, Sherry. There are 2 things that there are things I would suggest for both of those. You actually have 3 long-term goals that you mentioned there. So you might start off picking just one of those. But if you can group those behaviors together, that's where you have a bigger impact on your health over time. So the first thing I would say is, if you want to stop eating out, set a quota for yourself and, make it legit. If you're eating out already 10 meals a day, don't make it 3 meals, or 10 meals a week. Don't make it 3 meals a week. Make it 7 meals a week or something like that, and hold to that quota. Track that quota, because it's the process of tracking how many times you go out to eat that's going to be your short-term goal that gets you to where you want of eating out less. And then over time, you can decrease it as it becomes easier and easier to eat out less. If you want to cook more at home, you do the opposite. You set a quota for yourself of how many times you want to cook at home, and you track that, and you make sure that you're meeting your short-term goal about how many times you're cooking at home. And that's going to eventually lead you to a life where it's way easier for you to cook at home. For starting to walk 2 or 3 times per week, that's hard because it's every other day. I would say focus on walking every day, but 2 or 3 times a week make it a longer walk. So by every day getting out and just walking around the block, you're creating that daily habit of walking. And then 2 or 3 times a week, tracking it, get out and walk 5 times around or something like that. Whatever it is that, that fits within your exercise goals. Really good piece of advice about exercise goals is always focus on doing 80% of what you think you can actually do. Because 80% is going, if you get to 80%, and most of us won't even get there, but if you get to 80%, it's not going to be so painful that it keeps you from doing it the next day. You're not going to be so sore that you can't do it the next day. All right, we're running short on time now, so I'm going to scan through and see if there's some things that I haven't responded to. Jessica mentioned habits around food. Tips to stay on track during the holidays when food is everywhere. Set quotas on snacks. Allow yourself 1 snack a day or 2 snacks a day. Try to make one of them a healthy snack and then hold yourself to that. That's going to be the best way to sort of contain the things that happen at the holidays. Carly asked about getting more sleep. I'm an insomniac and usually get no more than 3 to 4 hours of sleep a night. I try to sleep but can't. My strategy to get more sleep involves relieving stress throughout the day that may prevent my mind from shutting down. That's good, Carly. You have the benefit of, we have a Sleep More, Stress Less program starting in the month of November that will give you so much great information about sleep. I do some of the presentations. I do the orientation of it. I help design the program. And we now have Pat Carter joining us. She is a new faculty member at UA and a sleep expert, and she's going to be answering specific questions about sleep disorders like insomniac. And we have Abby Horton doing some amazing talks for you about stress management. Let's see. Diane said, I would like to reduce the amount of time I spend on social media, which is difficult since I handle social media as part of my job. I need to figure out how to not go down the rabbit hole since I can't just walk away from it. So Diane, there are a bunch of tips about this. There's more and more advice online and in books and stuff that you can follow. The number one, if you haven't seen The Social Dilemma, it's a documentary that's out now that kind of deals with some of this. The number one thing you can do to break the link with social media is to turn off notifications. I did this last year. I turned off notifications for 2 months. And what I found is that when I turned them back on, I could ignore them because I had broken that link. So I highly recommend turning off notifications or turning them off and turning them on 1 time a day so that you can look through what you did get, but not be constantly barraged by them throughout the day. Sarah mentioned weight loss would be great, but it's challenging when working from home and providing childcare, #COVID. I guess if I woke up earlier, that would build some time in to get back to exercising. Sarah, one of the things that I think is great, if it's possible, is to build in a habit of exercise behavior with your kids. So if you can, if they're at all ambulatory, get them in the process of going, or in the habit of going on a walk with you every day, or doing something like that. If you email me, I can give you some ideas based on your specific situation. Erica wants to walk the Appalachian Trail. That's awesome. I have a really good friend who did that last year. You really, really have to train up to that. So I have a friend who did a 2-week hike in Scotland, and or I think it was longer than that, 7-week hike. And for a month before she left, she packed a pack and hiked 12 miles a day just to get in the habit of hiking. So that's one thing you can do. Start out by going on 5-mile walks every day, and then 10-mile walks, and then add in a pack, and get yourself to where you're used to the process of hiking. And y'all, I'm going to have to cut it off. We had questions about work-life balance. Keeping motivation is hard. Consistency in working out, diet plans, other things. Email me your questions, and I'm happy to send y'all an answer. But the main thing, the thing to come back to is everyday habits, everyday habits. Make yourself a little work list, a little checklist like you would make, an elementary schooler. Those things work. That's why we do them with elementary schoolers. You're smarter now, so it should work even better with you. Do the things that are going to connect you to your values, that are going to give you daily satisfaction about achieving your short-term goals, your small goals, knowing that you don't have to watch the large goal. It'll happen. You just focus on the short-term goals. And I'll wrap it up there, y'all. Thank you so much for attending today. We had over 30-some people. That's fantastic. We've got more Let's Talk coming up in the coming months, and the Sleep More, Stress Less program next month, which is going to be awesome. So thank you all for being here. Y'all enjoy the rest of your day.